Tariffs must be paired with policies that will increase domestic production and jobs, like strategic investments, strong procurement standards, and labor laws that boost workers' access to labor unions.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857 if you would like to call in. We do have a caller on the line calling from an anonymous number. We'll go ahead and bring them on the air. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, Anonymous.
What's on your mind?
All righty. So what do you think of the Trump tariff?
Yeah, I've got a whole thing lined up for that later in the program. I've got a couple of clips. I've got a couple of clips about that.
Love it or hate it?
Neither. I neither love it nor hate it.
Interesting. Well, do you recall seeing a lot of clips? In particular, Asmongold made a YouTube video on it, and it's about, back in the 90s where all the Democrats are saying the same things that Trump's saying today. But now today, they're not.
Yeah,
so
no, for sure. I mean, it
just exposes Democrats like you.
Well, I mean, I don't think it does expose me. I mean, what unions have been saying, which I'm a union member first and foremost. What unions have been saying, unions have been kind of moderately, like cautiously supportive, and because I've got a whole thing about it later on in the program, but I'll just quickly say that tariffs are good and can be used well. I am concerned about multiple things. I am concerned that Democrats are going to negatively polarize themselves into not supporting tariffs at all because Trump did tariffs and therefore tariffs bad. That is a genuine concern of mine because, like people have pointed out on Twitter, there have been lots of Democrats who have been supportive of tariffs in the past and who have been supportive of things like that. And so I am really concerned that we are going to see a dynamic where they get negatively polarized into opposing a good version of tariffs down the road because Trump did potentially a worse version of tariffs. That is going to, I'm very concerned that we are going to see a reversion to the status quo of like 2014, where Democrats were going around and touting TPP and being the free trade party, when after 2016, we had something of a bipartisan consensus that free trade has been destructive for America's working class. And so I am really concerned that there's going to be a negative polarization there. I am also concerned that Republicans, that rank and file Republicans, are going to get confused about what the problem is with free trade, because the Trump rhetoric around the tariffs has been around other countries putting tariffs on us, and that's what's problematic about free trade or whatever. That's the thing that's actually killing us. And that is not at all the major problem. The major problem is not that other countries have a 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or even 100% tariff on American manufacturing. The problem is that there are countries across the world who have basically slave labor, and American workers cannot compete with that on a dollar for dollar basis. And so, that's the problem. The problem is not that Mexico puts whatever tariff on us. The problem is that Mexican auto workers are exploited and don't make enough freaking money, right? And so even if you remove all of the tariffs from everybody, that is going to be just as bad as NAFTA, because American workers are not going to be able to work for $2 a day, right? And so that's the problem. And I'm concerned that we're going to have a situation where rank and file Republicans see maybe tariffs come off of American products going into other markets, and then they think the problem is solved. And then Democrats are all free trade, and then Republicans feel like the problem is solved, and we're back at NAFTA. And so I'm super concerned about I'm so concerned. Not a huge fan of the tariffs, because I think they are pointing at not the real problem. But And on the negative polarization of Democrats, I'm concerned that we're going to get a situation where, we're seeing a lot of people point at the stock market, and like it's most people don't own stocks, right? Like, I'm not freaking out that the stock market has lost 10%, right? And if you actually do pass, and this tariff policy is not, the whole thing, right? The tariff policy is not the whole thing that I would want. But if you did pass genuinely pro-worker policy, if you passed Medicare for all, if you passed something like a real fair trade bill that included improved working conditions for workers in places where we import products from, the stock market is going to fall probably by even more than this. And so I'm concerned that we are foreclosing the possibility of genuinely challenging Wall Street. Because Democrats have wedded themselves to like, oh, it's bad when the line goes down. And like, it's mostly, it's not good for working people when the line goes down, but that's like not the, that's not like the primary thing. And to the extent that working people are even connected at all to the stock market, it is only through our 401ks, which were a total scam to begin with. We used to have pensions in this country, a defined benefit. And so we were not connected to the stock market, right? We had a deal with our employers. We said, look, I'll work for you. I will sacrifice 20, 30, 40 years of my life for you. And you're going to give me, $1,000, $2,000 a month or something. And that was the deal. And now the deal is I sacrifice 20, 30, 40 years of my life to you. And we're both going to push money into the stock market and hope that things work out. That's a scam.
This is what I'm thinking and seeing with the Trump's tariffs. Trump is trying to crash the stock market at least 20%, causing a flight into treasuries. This will cause the Fed to slash interest rates so he can refinance the debt to a near 0% and cause a deflationary spiral, which will lower the cost of everything. He also intends to use tariffs as an initiative for companies to build in the U.S. to avoid having to pay them. The tariffs and the resulting global trade war will also force American farmers to sell more of their goods in the U.S. Due to the retaliatory trade measures by other countries, which will directly lower the price of groceries in the U.S. More than 94% of all stock is owned just by 8% of the U.S. population. Trump is literally taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor. This is why Trump is playing a game of hokey pokey with tariffs. One day he has a 25% tariff on Mexico, and the next day he doesn't. This is to cause extreme volatility in the markets and a desperate need and demand to flee towards treasury bonds, which are more stable but offer lower potential return. This is also why eggs are cheaper now than they were under Joe Biden. And that is my reply to the Trump tariffs and what you were saying.
Okay. Yeah. A very, very similar thing about the as far as the stock market. I mentioned that. I don't know if you heard me there, but I mentioned that most of the stock market is held by the rich, and so I'm not super concerned about the line going down. I don't know that I buy the rest of the plan, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So appreciate the call.
Yep. Alrighty.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Let's go ahead and talk about the tariff stuff. Because this is obviously a huge story. And like we were talking about, the stock market has gone down significantly, obviously. What is it right now? I think it was down 10% over the last month, 10.9% over the last month. We are actually down year over year. It's 1.5% lower than where we were a year ago. So, not good, but it is really important to understand that the majority of stocks are held by the rich, right? So I'm not going to get super pressed about the stock markets. And I also just want to underscore again, the only reason or the reason that most working people are tied to the stock market at all, to the extent that working people are tied to it, is with our 401ks, which it is important to underscore and remind people that 401ks are a scam by the rich because they don't want to pay us pensions, right? They don't want to have to agree to a defined benefit, so they went to 401ks. It was a scam by the rich and their politicians like Ronald Reagan. And so, if it hurts 401ks, that just illustrates the problem of 401ks being tied to the stock market, right? So, but obviously, the stock market going down is still, it's usually not good for workers. That usually does not, even though, because when the rich take a beating, a lot of times they take it out on working people. And so there's some cause for concern there. But, this is coming from a broad-based tariff policy, which I mentioned was slapdash. It's worth understanding just how slapdash it is. The tariffs, my understanding is that they include things like coffee from Colombia, and it's much more difficult to do coffee in America, especially coffee for all Americans, right? Just because of the climate. Bananas. Tariffs on bananas. We're not going to have a banana industry in the United States, okay? Right? And so that's it doesn't make sense. There's also tariffs that were announced on literally uninhabited islands. And so very slapdash, not a whole lot of thinking about it. But here's some unions' response to it. The United Steelworkers said, "Our union has been fighting on the front lines for fair trade for decades as flawed trade agreements and other policies robbed workers of their jobs and deprived our nation of critical capabilities across key sectors. Used strategically, tariffs are a crucial means of reining in bad actors who view access to the U.S. market as a right and not a privilege. Today's announcement helps send the message to our trading partners that they must earn that right. Tariffs, however, are only one of the many tools we need to promote fair trade and reverse course on outsourcing and offshoring jobs. First and foremost, we must ensure our trade policy targets cheaters rather than trusted economic allies like Canada. We should be working to build relationships, not barriers, with partners who have proven their commitment to joining us in tackling global overcapacity. Tariffs must also be paired with policies that will increase domestic production and jobs, like strategic investments, strong procurement standards, and labor laws that boost workers' access to labor unions. The administration must also take steps to prevent companies from using tariffs as an excuse to price gouge consumers. We welcome the administration's commitment to fair trade and encourage President Trump to consider a broader strategy that will level the playing field and promote widespread economic growth." And so there you go. That's kind of that's kind of been, a common sort of, like, there's a line here that unions are, we're supportive of tariffs, but the way that Trump is doing it is very concerning. Here's the AFL-CIO. "The strategic use of tariffs can be an effective tool to support our industries and protect jobs at home, but they must be accompanied by policies that invest in our manufacturing base and a strong commitment to promoting workers' fundamental right to organize trade unions and bargain collectively. Unfortunately, the Trump administration's attack on trade union workers' rights at home, gutting of the government agency that works to discourage the outsourcing of American jobs, and efforts to erode critical investments in U.S. manufacturing take us backward. We will continue to fight for fair trade, or for trade policy that prioritizes the interests of working people without causing unnecessary economic pain for America's working families." The UAW has been supportive of it, and they have been doing they've been doing a bunch of interviews about it. Here is Sean Fain on Face the Nation talking about why he supports tariffs generally.
We go now to the president of the United Auto Workers Union, Sean Fain. Sean, it's great to have you with us. I appreciate the time. Let's start very simply on the question of tariffs on autos and auto parts. Fundamentally and quite simply, why do you believe those are helpful for your membership?
Thanks for having me. Look, all you have to do is look at the history of the United States, especially in auto manufacturing in the last 30 years with the inception of NAFTA and unfair trade laws. We've seen over 90,000 manufacturing facilities leave the United States. We've seen In the big three alone in the last 20 plus years, 65 plants have closed. And so, look, tariffs aren't the total solution. Tariffs are a tool in the toolbox to get these companies to do the right thing, and the intent behind it is to bring jobs back here and invest in the American workers.
All right, there you go. And so there you go. You can see there that he's pretty bullish about it. And we do have thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. Ben sent me a statement. I thought they had put one out from the United Auto Workers. Here's what they had to say. For 40 years, we've seen the devastating effects of so-called free trade on the working class. Corporations have been driving a nonstop race to the bottom by killing blue-collar jobs in America to go exploit some poor worker in another country by paying poverty wages. Tariffs are a powerful tool in the toolbox for undoing the injustice of anti-worker trade deals. We are glad to see an American president take aggressive action on ending the free trade disaster that has dropped like a bomb on the working class. There's been a lot of talk of these tariffs disrupting the economy, but if corporate America chooses to price gouge the American consumer or attack the American worker because they don't want to pay their fair share, corporate America bears the blame for that decision. The working class suffered all the pain of NAFTA, and we won't suffer all the pain of undoing NAFTA. We want to see corporate America, from the auto industry and beyond, recommit to the working class that makes the products and generates the profits that keep this country going. The UAW is in active negotiations with the Trump administration about their plans to end the free trade disaster. We look forward to working with the White House to shape the auto tariffs in April to benefit the working class. We want to see serious action that will incentivize companies to change their behavior, reinvest in America, and stop cheating the American worker, the American consumer, and the American taxpayer. So I appreciate that, Ben. Thank you for sending that to me. There was another UAW announcement or another UAW statement the week prior about the, going over the announcement. And they were just talking, and in that statement, they talked about how there's been so many jobs decline and how there is, some excess capacity. Said right now thousands of auto workers are laid off at Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis following recent decisions by auto executives to ship jobs to Mexico. Across a dozen big three auto plants that have seen major declines, production has fallen by 2 million units per year in the past decade, while millions of vehicles sold here are made with low-wage, high-exploitation labor abroad. And so that means auto companies that have made record profits get to drive wages down further for both Mexican and U.S. workers, while Wall Street and the corporate class get record payouts. And so they point to a lot of excess capacity that could be utilized in the United States. And they point to Volkswagen in Chattanooga, Tennessee, specifically, where the company recently violated labor law by unilaterally announcing the elimination of a shift during the first contract negotiations. Volkswagen makes 75% of their North America product in Mexico for $7 an hour, and over 40% of their U.S. sales are produced by workers earning poverty wages in Mexico. That shift could be restored immediately as production shifts back to Mexico. And so there you go. But even Sean Fain, as bullish as he's been about the trade, about these tariffs, he even hedges a little bit on this, and that's kind of illustrating, even the most bullish union person on these tariffs still has some concern, and the tariffs themselves are not going to be enough to bring good-paying union jobs to this country. Listen to Sean Fain talking about what else is needed.
And the other thing to me is, these can't just be as with the Biden administration when they did the stuff for battery work and EV work. We had to come in and say, no, these can't just be union jobs or jobs. They got to be good-paying union jobs that set standards. So the big part of this that gets left out a lot of times is if they're going to bring jobs back here, they need to be life-sustaining jobs where people can make a good wage, a living wage, have adequate health care, and have a retirement security and not have to work 7 days a week or multiple jobs just to scrape to get by paycheck to paycheck.
So there you go. That's very, very important stuff there. There have been a couple of articles written about tariffs for labor notes that kind of are a little bit more pointed about the concerns that workers and union members should have about tariffs, and it's really important to point to that. And so this is an article by Sean Crawford in Labor Notes. Will Trump's tariffs be good for auto workers? He said, during the 2019 General Motors strike, while my fellow workers and I were pounding the pavement, something inspirational was happening at the south of the border. Mexican auto worker Israel Cervantes, along with many others at a GM plant in Silao, refused overtime in solidarity with us during that strike. And he said that practical action was particularly helpful to our cause because they built large trucks, which are the main source of revenue for our common employer. Israel was fired soon afterwards, and he went on to help build the National Independent Union for Workers in the Automotive Industry in Mexico, ousting an employer-friendly union in Silao. That new independent union has just won 10% raises for Mexican GM workers. And so he's talking about how as these talks grow, he's concerned about the relationships that the UAW is building in Mexico, and if this is going to hurt workers in, if this is going to hurt the relationships that need to be built between workers in the United States and Canada and Mexico. He says that cross-border solidarity strikes at the heart of one of the mechanisms that enable the corporate class to dominate. It's global reach. Giant corporations help write international trade laws. When they cross borders, they are diversifying in investor logic, pitting one set of workers against the other. When one part of their operation is on strike, they can continue in another, and that's why they wanted overtime from the workers in Silao when we were on strike here. Divide and conquer is the name of the game. And so, coming together and actually refusing to be pitted against each other is really important. And so, he points out that the UAW is hoping that after the U.S. lost 700,000 jobs because of NAFTA, that punitive tariffs are going to incentivize domestic production and build the U.S. manufacturing base. But Crawford mentions that if the company doesn't give it to you in writing, then don't believe it. That's a truism in bargaining with the company, right? He said these tariffs promise exactly 0 new factories will be built, but a couple of things are certain. Vehicle prices will go up, perhaps by as much as $6,400, because auto companies will pass on any tariff costs to our car buyers, and production will be disrupted due to decreased sales and logistical wrangling, which likely means layoffs, and Michigan could be hit the hardest. To do something as major as build a factory, companies need a safe bet. They need a consistent policy that provides long-term incentives to justify such a move. Trump has already shown that his policies are anything but consistent. An impulsive man's fleeting whim is hardly justification to build an entire plant with all the logistics, supply chains, and investments that come with it. And even if a company decided to build a new factory in the U.S., it would take a couple of years to complete, whereas other nations could have imposed retaliatory tariffs by the time you read this. When Trump was asked about the impact of tariffs on prices, he said, I couldn't care less because if the prices on foreign cars go up, they're going to buy American cars. Sean Crawford says the reality check is that GM and Ford also build vehicles in Mexico and Canada, as well as relying on parts flowing across borders for vehicles assembled there. Peter Navarro, a senior trade advisor to the president, says the American people should simply trust in Trump. And so there you go. There's the article's obviously a lot longer. I can only hit a few points of it, but there's some good pushback there, and it's definitely worth reading. Again, the title of the article is "Will Trump's Tariffs Be Good for Auto Workers?" Sean Crawford in Labor Notes. There's another article, this one in Jacobin, "Tariffs Aren't Enough to Protect Good Auto Jobs" by Andrew Elrod. Some good points made in there. So encourage y'all to read those if you get the time. Also had somebody message me that on the stocks diving, in the absence of worker protections during actions that cause these kinds of downturns, one of the first costs to cut in order to gain back stock value is the workers, and that's exactly true. And so I kind of mentioned that, but just to put a point on that, I'm not going to lose any sleep about stock prices themselves going down, but it's worth noting stock prices going down, not typically good for workers. Stock prices going up, not necessarily good for workers either. Stock prices going down, probably not good. So there you go. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.